Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. As we all know, being a prepper can be a big challenge from a financial standpoint. In addition to the normal bills and other expenses that everyone has, we're also trying to invest in things that could help us and our families survive during a disaster. And if you're preparing for something long-term, then it becomes even more of a challenge, because having everything that you would need to survive for years at a time isn't cheap. When you combine that with the fact that most of us don't have the funds for prepping that we wish we did, we have to be very careful with how we spend our money and try to get the best bang for our buck. And when it comes to budgeting, I think $100 is a good reference point. The fortunate among us may be able to spend that monthly, while the rest of us may only be able to do that a couple of times a year, maybe during the holidays or if we get a bonus from work. But one good way that you could spend $100 is by building up your prepper library. There's actually a lot of very good essential text out there covering prepping that are available for around $15 or so. So that means that you could get several covering different vital aspects of preparedness. Some books can help you be a better prepper now by giving you detailed information on what you should be doing to prepare for different kinds of disasters, while others can serve as references during times where you don't have access to the internet. One of my favorite authors in the prepper and survival community is Jim Cobb. I probably have more books by him than I do anybody else. He was one of the people that long before I started this channel, I read his stuff so that I could learn about prepping, and he's just released the second edition of his book, Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide. This is an excellent, just kind of all-around reference for covering different aspects of preparedness, particularly if you're concerned about a longer-term survival situation. So it has things that you would need to know about basics like food and water storage, but it also includes other things like community survival planning. But what I really like about Jim's books is, first of all, his writing style is very easy to follow, and his advice is also practical. And he also does a good job including some humor in his books as well, which is always welcome and makes them a lot more enjoyable to read than some other similar books in the prepper and survival space. And some of his other books that I've read include Prepper's Home Defense, Prepper's Complete Book of Disaster Readiness, the original Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide, and Prepper Survival Hacks. And I would recommend these to anybody wanting those kinds of resources in printed form. So I'm going to put links to those in the description below. Now, when it comes to reference materials, the SAS Survival Handbook is one of the best wilderness survival guides that you'll find. It covers survival essentials like how to find water and how to build fires, along with information on how to survive in specific environments like desert settings. It also includes information on different kinds of traps and illustrations to help you put those together, along with illustrations on other things like poisonous plants, edible plants, and then also for different animals to help you identify those out in the field. The Audubon field guides can also be helpful for identifying different animals and plants, especially if you live in North America. If you haven't used those before, they have a ton of very high quality color pictures of different species, whatever the particular guide is covering. And the ones that have things like different insects and spiders and reptiles would be very useful if you get bit by one of them and need treatment, because identifying those animals is always very helpful for that. Then there's other guides that can help you identify different kinds of trees, and even one over weather that has pictures of different cloud formations so that you can look at the cloud, look at the book, and then kind of gauge what sort of weather could be headed your way. For medicine, the Survival Medicine Handbook is the quintessential prepper medical reference. It's over 600 pages long and includes information on how to treat different kinds of illnesses and injuries, along with information on medications, including antibiotics. Now, this one is a little bit more expensive than some of the other books that I've mentioned, but it's still a very good one to have around. For homesteading, the Encyclopedia Country Living has a ton of information that can help you with things like gardening, canning, and then even selecting the right land for your homestead. The Foxfire books are another good homesteading resource. Now, if you get all of them, it's going to cost you much more than $100. But the different books cover different topics, so you can select the ones that are most important to you. But one very good way to make your dollar go further when buying books is to check a local used bookstore. I know there's been several books I've been able to pick up at mine, especially those Audubon field guides, so that might be a good thing to look into. Another way that you could spend $100 is by continuing to add to your most basic preps like food and water storage. For water, even though a lot of the bulk storage barrels are going for more than $100, you can still pick up most portable water containers for much less. Aquatainers are some of the most cost-effective since they can be found in some stores for under $20 each. They hold a decent amount of water at 7 gallons, and they also include a spigot, which is something that a lot of the portable water containers out there do not. Their downsides, though, is that they can be pretty heavy since they hold 7 gallons. That is a lot of water. And also, they're not the most durable option out there. If you want something more durable, water bricks and aqua bricks can be a good option, but they are more expensive. They also hold less water, which can make them lighter, so that could be beneficial, and they're also easier to fit beside furniture and things like that. So they're pretty good if you live in an apartment, but they also don't include a spigot, so that's an additional cost. If you want the most durable thing out there, then you probably want to get the military water can. You see these on TV bouncing around on the back of Humvees, and if they can survive that sort of stuff, they can probably survive anything that we would throw at them. Then there's also several water filtration and purification options that you can pick up for under $100. Grail purifier bottles are excellent options since they can remove bacteria, protozoa, viruses, and chemicals. Sawyer filters don't remove as many contaminants, but they're relatively inexpensive, and the tap filter can also be used on faucets, spigots, or to create a gravity-fed bucket filter. So even though they do have some limitations, if you're somewhere maybe in a backcountry environment where you don't have to worry about viruses or chemicals, then they can work even as a standalone option. For food, spending $100 on dry goods like beans and rice will get you quite a bit, but don't forget to store other things also. Instant potatoes, pasta, and rolled oats are examples of foods that can add some variety to your diet, and they also have a very long shelf life. Picking up some Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers will help you store these for 20 years or more if you package them correctly. I did a video showing how to use Mylar bags to store food long term, and I'll put a card for that at the end of this video. Canned goods are also good to pick up, and while they won't store as long as dry goods, they do still have a fairly decent shelf life and can help give some more variety to your diet. They're probably the easiest way to store things like meat, fruit, and vegetables long term, and having those really can go a long way towards giving your body all of the different nutrients that it needs. Another way to ensure that you have a long-term supply of vegetables is to invest in heirloom seeds. You can find large survival seed kits for $100 or less, but if you know you're not going to use all those within the next couple of years, it may be a good idea just to pick up some individual packets of seeds of different varieties that you think may grow well in your area. I know I've been kind of experimenting with my gardening the past couple years, trying to figure out what works well for where I live, and then also what works well for the methods of gardening that I'm using, because that isn't something that you want to try to figure out when a disaster is going on. For fruits, picking up a couple of trees and planting them in your backyard is a very good way to have a renewable food source, and it's one that a lot of people overlook. But one thing to remember is that some species, like different kinds of apple trees, may require a second tree of the same type nearby for pollination. And this is probably also something that you may want to wait and do during the springtime, just so there's availability of those plants and that they have the best chance to establish themselves, because sometimes planting something during the dead of summer may not be the best idea. Another food-related prep that you can pick up for under $100 is different off-grid cooking methods. Things like the Firebox stove and the Solo Stove Light are nice since they can use natural materials like sticks, but they also work with things like alcohol stoves also. So that makes them excellent choices to keep in something like your bug-out bag or other survival kits. The all-season solar cooker is another option, and it'll allow you to cook various things without having to worry about storing or collecting fuel. And while I wouldn't recommend this being your only off-grid cooking method, because we all know sunlight varies, it is good to have for those times where you do have plenty of sunlight, especially during the summer months. Then of course you can also pick up simple butane and propane stoves. These work really well for short-term emergencies, and they're much easier and faster to use than some of the other things we've talked about. Another way that preppers could spend $100 is by picking up some basic tools. I think this is one area that a lot of preppers overlook, but it's still very important. Probably the tools that are most immediately applicable for preppers would be things for gardening, like shovels, shovels and rakes. And also other things like axes, which you could use to split wood or maybe break down a limb that's fallen over your driveway. But when picking up gardening tools, don't overlook small things like spades and pruning shears, and also be sure to pick up things like a good-sized garden hose and sprayer. Hand tools like hammers, screwdrivers, and wrenches are also good to have. While they aren't necessarily specific to prepping, I think anything that can help you be more self-reliant is definitely a good thing, because if you're not able to deal with just normal small things that come up in everyday life when everything else is going fine, then your chances of being able to handle things during something like a collapse or even some different emergency situations are pretty slim. Then aside from just basic general purpose tools, it's also good to have tools and equipment to keep your vehicles and other equipment running. The first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind is going to be jumper cables, but in addition to these, you may also want to pick up a battery jump pack. These are useful if you're in a situation where you need a jump start and nobody's nearby that can help you, and they're also a little bit more convenient to use because you don't have to position two vehicles close together so that you can connect jumper cables. But that being said, I would still recommend having some good jumper cables in your car. Those battery packs, they may drain on their own, they may get turned on accidentally, or just break down for some other reason because they are a sensitive electronic device. Another set of items that you could use your shiny $100 bill on is survival gear. And I will say that some things in this category have gone up drastically in price over the past few years. While you can still get this BK16 for under $100 if you order it from the right place, that's still at least $30 more than what it was when I got mine a few years ago. Folding saws haven't gone up quite as much. You can still find decent options like the Bahco Laplander and the Corona folding saw for around $30, and you can also pick up pocket chainsaws like these for around $20. You can also pick up other survival items like this Survival Bivy or Survivor Cord Paracord. These are excellent additions to things like your bug out bag or get home bag. Then, even though these aren't necessarily survival items, USB battery banks are also good to keep in your kit since they allow you to charge up things like your cell phone or other devices like flashlights during power outages or if you're stranded somewhere. Wool blankets work well at home, and they're also excellent to keep in vehicle kits, especially during the winter months. If you get stranded during a winter storm, having one could make a very, very big difference. And even though absolutely no one in the Northern Hemisphere is thinking about winter preps right now, this actually is a pretty good time to pick up certain cold weather items. Propane space heaters are a good example of this. I know there's some stores that have several of them just collecting dust on the shelf right now, but in a few months when we hear that a winter storm's coming our way, those same exact heaters are going to be snatched up in a heartbeat. Propane cylinders and bottles are another good thing to pick up because stores have them in stock right now for summer cookouts, but people aren't really panic buying them because as of right now, there isn't really much of a reason to. And you may also be able to find some deals on candles. Those are another thing that people aren't really thinking about right now, and you may even be able to find them on clearance. I think a couple months ago, and I know that's been a while, I did see some little tea light candles on clearance. Another way that preppers can spend $100 is to improve their security and defense. And while ammo is probably the first thing that most people think of, there are other things in that price range that you can pick up as well. Door Armor Max is a door reinforcement kit that'll make your door much harder to kick in. It has a 4-foot long strike plate and then also I believe 4-inch screws which sink all the way down into the studs, which really helps strengthen things up. But if you don't want to spend that much money, you can pick up something like a box of 3.5-inch deck screws and replace the hardware that's in your strike plate now. While it won't do as good of a job as something like a reinforcement kit would, it's going to be a lot better than the screws that are probably in there now. Magnetic door and window alarms are another inexpensive thing you can pick up. I think you can find multi-packs of those for around $15 or $20. Also, motion-activated security lights are also good. Now, if you're wanting to see specific preps that cost around $100, then check out this video, or if you're wanting to see how I package food in Mylar bags for long-term storage, then check out this video. Thank y'all for stopping by. Y'all have a good one.